Hello, and welcome back to Bicyclelegs Talks Music and another edition of Anniversary Albums. Today we're going to be looking at albums that are having a significant anniversary in the month of August 2025. For those of you who are new to this series, when I say a significant anniversary, I'm talking about one that ends in a 5 or a 0. So 50th, 25th, 40th, 35th, that sort of thing. You'll get the hang of it as we go along. As always, I've picked out 10 albums. Please do let me know in the comments which ones you think I should have included that I didn't. And let's get started with an album that is having its 60th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 6th of August 1965, and that is Help by the Beatles. Now, I've done a Beatles studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please do check that out if you haven't already. I feel like Help is a bit of a transitional album. Obviously, it's, side one is soundtrack songs to their second movie, Help, which I think is a wonderful movie. I don't know if it's quite as good as A Hard Day's Night, but it's still really, really good. And of course, there's a lot of really well-known songs on this album, on both the soundtrack side and the non-soundtrack side. I mean, this has got Yesterday on it, the most covered song in history. But it's also got the title track, Help. You've got To Hide Your Love Away, I Need You, which is a great early George Harrison song. You're Gonna Lose That Girl, Ticket to Ride. One of my favourite Paul songs, which is I've Just Seen a Face. But you've also got some songs that I don't think are well known enough, especially for Beatles songs, and I think they should be well known because I think they're really, really good songs. Things like The Night Before, which is a great Paul song. You Like Me Too Much, which is a really good George Harrison song. Tell Me What You See, which is sort of John and Paul together. There's a lot of really, really good music on this album. And it's the last album where they would do any cover versions. Ringo sings Act Naturally, and John sings Dizzy Miss Lizzy. So it's a terrific album, and it's definitely a bridge between, the sort of studio work, the live in the studio mostly sort of work of the early Beatles, and starting to get a little more experimental as they would go into Rubber Soul and Revolver and go on from there. Obviously, they're starting to add some more outside instruments like flutes on You've Got to Hide Your Love Away and things like that. So it's a really, really good album. I don't think it gets quite the credit it deserves, and I probably didn't rank it all that high in my ranking, but that's only because there are so many terrific Beatles albums. There's no such thing as a bad Beatles album. There's no even such thing as an ordinary Beatles album. They're all very good or better. So the next album we're going to have a look at is having its 30th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 8th of August 1995. It is the self-titled debut album by Ben Folds 5. I only have this one on CD, unfortunately, but I'll definitely need to find a vinyl copy of it to add to the collection, because I love those early Ben Folds 5 albums. They would do 3 albums and then they would split up. They would come back much later and do another album. Of course, Ben Folds has had a storied solo career in between. But this album, it was a real outlier in 1995. 1995, we're still in the grunge era. We're starting to get into post-grunge. There was a lot of electronic dance music around and that sort of thing. And then here comes Ben Folds 5. There's only 3 of them, despite the name. And they're a piano, bass, drums trio. It really was outside anything else that was going on in music in 1995. And this album did really well. The next one would do even better. But I loved Ben Folds. I love his songwriting. It's very wry, it's witty, but it's edgy as well. This is not cutesy music. Musically, he absolutely thumps the piano. The bass is like really distorted. The drums are interesting because they're a little bit rock, they're a little bit jazz. They're like, it's just it's a heady mix, and as I say, it sounded like nothing else in 1995, and maybe that's what made it stand out from the pack. But it starts off with the wonderful Jackson Cannery, Philosophy is a great song. Julianne, Where's Summer Bee? Love that song. Alice Childress is another absolutely wonderful song on this album. Uncle Walter is one of his really witty songs. Best Imitation of Myself is great. The Last Polka, Boxing. There's so many good songs on this album. So if you don't know Ben Folds 5, you don't remember them, it's been a long time since you've gone and listened to them, go and check them out, because it's a really, really great album. And as are all of their albums, to be honest. The next album I'm going to have a look at is having its 55th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 10th of August 1970, and that is Weasels Rip My Flesh by the Mothers of Invention. Rizz. Love that cover. And love that very ominous, or those ominous Frank Zappas on the back cover too. Now I've done a Frank Zappa studio albums ranked top 10. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please do check that out. Spoiler alert, this one did make the top 10, so it is one of my favourite Frank Zappa albums out of the 62 that he released before he died and the 30 odd that have come out since he died. But, you know, it's got some absolutely great songs on it, like My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama and Orange County Lumber Truck, the title track, Weasels Rip My Flesh. You got some of the best song titles. So one of the things I love about Frank, apart from, you know, his music is so interesting, his guitar playing so great, his arranging skills are brilliant. He comes up with some of the best song titles. You know, there's one on here called Dwarf Nebula Processional March and Dwarf Nebula. It's like, wow. But then he beats that with Prelude to the Afternoon of a Sexually Aroused Gas Mask. It's like, and this is a guy who didn't do drugs. So, you know, you don't need drugs to be weird, kids. You know, you've got Toads of the Short Forest. You've got Did You Get Any On Ya? Eric Dolphy Memorial Barbecue. And then there's a cover of Little Richard's Directly From My Heart to You. So, yeah, it's a very interesting album, like a lot of those early Mothers albums are. You know, that early Mothers is one of my favourite Frank Zappa periods, along with, you know, sort of the jazz fusion-y stuff that would come sort of the early to mid 70s is another period I absolutely love of Frank Zappa. So yeah, check out that top 10 I did if you haven't already, and you'll get an idea of where my taste in Frank Zappa lies. Because, I mean, Zappa's one of those guys, he's just got so much different music in his whole catalogue that, you know, you're going to be fans of certain eras more than others. Even if you like it all, there's going to be certain periods and certain things he's doing that you're going to like more than other periods. And that's just natural with a guy who put out as many albums as Frank did. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 15th of August 1980, and that is Panorama by the Cars. Now, I've done a Cars studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please do check that out if you haven't already. Panorama is an interesting album because it's their third album, and it came after the great success of the self-titled debut and Candy-O, and it shows a band that were kind of bucking a little bit against the formula that they'd set up with those first two albums. They wanted to do something different, something a little more experimental, something a little more daring. And, you know, a lot of people didn't like this album so much when it came out, and it's an album I had to grow to love, but now it's, you know, I would probably rank the Cars albums a little differently than I did in that show now. But, and this one would probably be the one that was going up a little in the estimations. Again, I don't think the Cars ever did a bad album, but this is a very, very interesting album, and I like it a lot. You know, the title track is great. Touch and Go was, you know, the single off the album, like the lead single. And yeah, but you've also got things like Gimme Some Slack, Don't Tell Me No, You know, Misfit Kid, You Wear Those Eyes, that's a great, great song. Running to You and Up and Down. You know, there are certain songs on the album that have that sort of classic Cars sound from those first two albums, but they're definitely trying something a little bit different on this album, and I think they need to be commended for that. And also, I think it led them to do some really more interesting things when you get to Shake It Up and albums like that. So yeah, it's an underrated album in the Cars catalogue for sure, and one that definitely needs a bit more love. The next album we're going to have a look at is also having its 60th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 16th of August 1965, so exactly 10 days after the Beatles' Help. And it's considered an all-time classic by this artist, and for good reason. I'm talking about E.S.P. by Miles Davis. Now obviously this is his second great quintet. You've got Miles, you've got Wayne Shorter, you've got Tony Williams, you've got Ron Carter, and you've got Herbie Hancock. And this is, you know, still absolutely acoustic jazz. There's no electric instruments on this album yet. That'll be a few years away yet. And but this, you know, if I was going to rank my favourite, you know, sort of second great quintet albums, this one would be right up there. You know, the title track E.S.P. is great. 81, Little One, RJ. You know, all of these players are virtuosos, and they all get their moments to shine on this album. Agitation is great. Iris and Mood. You know, it's hard sometimes to classify this jazz. Is it post-bop? Is it modal? Is it, you know... He's doing a little bit of all of that, and you know, he's not yet working with Tia McCrao. This album's produced by Irving Townsend, but it's just an absolutely wonderful album, and I'm lucky enough to own an original Australian pressing. So, yeah, I mean, if you're into jazz, it's just one of the best. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 22nd of August 1980. It's an album by this band that's really gone up in the last 5-10 years in estimations of people. I am, of course, talking about Drama by Yes, or Drama, as our friend Martin Popoff would say. Now, I've done a Yes studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please check it out. And yes, I ranked every album. I didn't just do a top 10. It was a intense show, that one. And yeah, I mean, this one ranked pretty high because I love this album a lot. Obviously, this is the album where John Anderson and Rick Wakeman had left the band and were replaced by Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes, also known as the Buggles. That's fine by me because I'm a huge Buggles fan. And I think they're absolutely wonderful on this album. Trevor Horn couldn't quite make a whole world tour. His voice didn't hold up for the entire thing. And the band kind of fell apart after that tour, which, you know, is a real shame. But it then led to the 90125 era of Yes, and it also led to Asia, you know, where Steve Howe and Jeff Downes went off and formed Asia. So, but this album, it is a bit of an outlier in the Yes catalogue. I mean, it's still very progressive. It's got long tracks and, you know, adventurous playing, but it's also got a hard edge, almost metallic, almost, in some of the playing, especially on a song like Machine Messiah. You know, some of the riffing that Steve Howe is doing is just, you know, it's more heavy rock than anything he'd done on a Yes album before that. You know, but you've also got, you know, Man in a White Car, which is this little sort of 1.5 minute interlude. Very Bugglesy, that one, and I like it. You got Does It Really Happen? You got the wonderful Into the Lens. Now again, that was a Buggles tune originally, a song called I Am a Camera. And if you go and listen to the second Buggles album, which is called Adventures in Modern Recording, they record it the way they originally wrote it. And but it came out after Drama did. So it's interesting to compare and contrast the two pieces. I think they're both great. Run Through the Light is wonderful, and then Tempest Fugit. I mean, that, you know, it's just such a great riff. Terrific, terrific album. And as a bit of an outlier in the E.S. catalogue, I think it's absolutely brilliant. So the next album we're going to have a look at is having its 25th anniversary in the month of August. So it's the youngest album we'll be looking at today. It was originally released on the 22nd of August 2000. And that is 5 by Spock Beard. Now I'm actually going to be doing, probably next week, a Spock Beard studio albums ranked just of the Neil Morse era albums. So that's the first 6 Spock Beard albums. But I have done a favourite albums of all time show on 5. I'll leave a link to that in the description, so please do check that out if you haven't already. I adore this album. I have been known to say that At the End of the Day, which is the opening track, which is 16.5 minutes long, might be my favourite song ever, which is a huge call. And it's also got the brilliant 27-minute The Great Nothing. You know, Neil Morse could write these incredible epic tracks. And The Great Nothing is very autobiographical. It's just an incredible track. But then you've got some of the shorter songs on here are really good. Revelation is quite heavy. Like the verses are delicate, and then the choruses are really heavy and dark and menacing. Thoughts Part 2 is the song that introduced me to the band Gentle Giant, because on the Making of 5 DVD documentary, Neil kept referring to Thoughts Part 2 as their Gentle Giant song, and I'd never heard of Gentle Giant, so I checked that band out because of that reference that Neil gave during the recording of Thoughts Part 2. Thoughts Part 2 is just an absolutely brilliant song. All on a Sunday is Spock Beard at their most sort of radio friendly. You know, it's a 4-minute song. You could hear, you know, it's got that alternative rock kind of sound. And then Goodbye to Yesterday is this really beautiful, delicate ballad. So you've got everything that makes Spock Beard great on this album. I don't think it's going to surprise anybody that this is going to rank very highly when I do rank those 6 Neil Morse era Spock Beard albums. So do check that out, hopefully next week, as I say. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of August. It was originally released on the 27th of August 1980. It is the second album by this wonderful band from Athens, Georgia. I am, of course, talking about Wild Planet by the B-52s. I've done a B-52 studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. This ranked very, very highly. I won't say exactly where, but very, very highly. I love this album to death. You know, it starts with the wonderful Party Out of Bounds, Dirty Back Road. Oh, I love that song, you know. Running Around is great fun. Give Me Back My Man is a great showcase for Cindy Wilson. Private Idaho. Wow, what a song. I remember seeing them play that on Countdown, which is an Australian music program. As Tom Curlis pointed out when we did our show recently on Joe Jackson, it's similar to Top of the Pops, if you're British, if you know that show. So, and then side 2, you've got Devil in My Car, which is a lot of fun. Quiche Lorraine's just bizarre, and I love that about it. Strobe Light might be the funniest song the B-52s ever did. And then you get the wonderful 53 Miles West of Venus to close the album out. Just absolutely, top to bottom, an absolute new wave banger. Can't recommend this album enough. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 60th anniversary in the month of August. It's a good month for 60th anniversaries this month. This was released on the 30th of August 1965. It's an all-time classic by an all-time classic artist. I am, of course, talking about Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. I mean, just an absolute classic. It's got like a Rolling Stone on it. Need I say more? But I mean, it's got so much more on it. You know, it takes a lot to laugh. It takes a train to cry. It's got Tombstone Blues. It's got this title track, Highway 61 Revisited. It's got Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, Desolation Row, you know, Ballad of a Thin Man. There's just so many classic Bob Dylan songs on this album. It's just, you know, I mean, this album and the previous one was Bob Dylan starting to go electric. And of course, that was very controversial when he took that live. So, you know, I mean, this album is, you know, remarkable for that, but it's also remarkable just for the breadth and depth of Bob Dylan's songwriting and his singing. It's got great musicians on it like Michael Bloomfield and Al Kooper, you know. So, I mean, you, again, can't recommend this album enough. If you're, you know, I'm sure all the Dylan fans know this album really, really well. It's one of his all-time classics. But if you've never really gotten into Dylan, this is a great place to start, I think. And then the last album we're going to have a look at today is having its 40th anniversary in the month of August. It was released exactly 20 years after Highway 61 Revisited. So it was released on the 30th of August 1985. And that is The Head on the Door by The Cure. Now, I was lucky enough to be asked to participate in a panel book by the great Martin Popov on The Cure. I'll leave a link in the description where you can check that book out and purchase it from martinpopov.com. This was one of the albums I got to talk about, and I'm so glad I did because, you know, this is, you know, I'd started to love The Cure with some of the singles that came before this, things like Love Cats and Let's Go to Bed. But this was the first album of theirs that came out that I really gravitated towards. And my little sister, she was huge into The Cure at this stage. So, you know, and this had some huge hits on it. You know, it's got Close to Me on it. It's got In Between Days. It's an interesting album. It's definitely a commercial sounding album compared with some of the earlier Cure stuff. But it's also definitely still got that goth feel. It's got a bit of a psychedelic feel. It's just a really, really intriguing album. You know, things like Kyoto Song and The Blood and 6 Different Ways, A Night Like This, Sin King, you know, The Baby Screams. It's such a wonderful, wonderful album. It's definitely on the more accessible side for The Cure, and I think that's a good thing, but it definitely doesn't sort of abandon the things that made The Cure interesting on some of those earlier albums. You know, those atmospheres and textures and darkness in some of these songs. So there you have it, everyone. Those are my anniversary albums for the month of August 2025. Please let me know in the comments which of these albums you prefer, which maybe you don't care for so much, and most importantly, which albums should I have included that I didn't? Because sometimes they're albums that were on my longer list, and then other times they were things I never even thought of. And I love it when you guys come up with those, even though I go and kick myself sometimes, because it makes me go and listen to those albums. So thank you for your suggestions. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see some of my other anniversary album shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, like the ones I mentioned in this episode, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated Bicyclelegs Facebook page and a Bicyclelegs Teespring if you want to buy a t-shirt or something like that. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.